Born into a Burkina Faso plagued by political instability, Traore rose not as a polished politician, but as a soldier forged in the fire of his nation's struggles. His name carries weight across Africa and beyond, not only because of his youth. He became one of the youngest leaders in the world at just 34, but also because of the way he challenges the world order. When others expect submission, he offers defiance. When the West threatens, he answers with bold declarations that Africa will no longer bow. This unflinching stance makes him both an inspiration to millions and a perceived threat to global powers who have long considered Africa their playground. Traore's danger lies in his unpredictability. He is not bound by the old rules of diplomacy, nor does he shy away from calling out hypocrisy on live platforms. Every word he speaks has the weight of generations behind it, and his opponents know that silencing him is nearly impossible. For his supporters, he is the embodiment of Africa's long-awaited independence. For his adversaries, he is a dangerous disruptor who could inspire a continent-wide revolt against foreign dominance. His danger, then, is not just military, it is ideological, a force capable of shifting the balance of power in a world that has grown comfortable with African silence. To understand why some call Ibrahim Traore dangerous, we need to examine the unique blend of qualities he embodies. Traore is not dangerous in the sense of reckless violence, rather, his danger stems from the way he shatters expectations. He is young, fearless, and unafraid to stand on the same stage as global superpowers, often turning their own words against them. In a world dominated by scripted diplomacy, his authenticity cuts like a blade. When Western leaders speak of a partnership, Traore exposes the shadow of exploitation behind the term. When others lecture about democracy, he points to centuries of double standards. This raw defiance is what unsettles powerful nations. His voice cannot be controlled, his presence cannot be ignored. Traore's rise also embodies a larger movement sweeping across Africa. His leadership has ignited hope among a generation weary of corruption and foreign interference. For them, Traore is not simply a president, he is a symbol that Africa can break free from the chains of dependency. This symbolic power makes him dangerous to those invested in maintaining the status quo. Imagine millions of young Africans taking inspiration from his example, rejecting subservience, and demanding self-reliance. That is the true threat he poses, not just as one man, but as a catalyst for continental awakening. At the same time, critics warn that Traore's fiery rhetoric could escalate tensions. His refusal to compromise with larger powers may isolate Burkina Faso economically, or even invite military pressure. Yet Traore seems prepared for these risks, embracing them as necessary sacrifices for sovereignty. His danger, then, is twofold. To his enemies abroad, he represents an unpredictable adversary who won't bend. To allies at home, he carries the risk of confronting giants without fear of consequences. Whether hero or hazard, his presence ensures that Africa's voice will no longer be ignored. Ibrahim Traore's story is dangerous not because of who he is alone, but because of what he represents. For decades, Africa has been painted as a continent destined to follow, never to lead. Leaders were often either puppets of foreign interests or too weak to resist them. Traore broke this mold. By seizing control at a young age and standing firmly against outside influence, he embodies a generational rebellion. To Western powers, this is alarming. Here is a leader who doesn't beg for aid, doesn't bow for approval, and doesn't fear being isolated. His danger lies in his defiance. The world is used to African voices being silenced or moderated. Traore raises his voice without hesitation, and millions listen. His speeches, direct, raw, and unpolished, carry the weight of unspoken truths. When he declares that Africa will no longer be looted, he forces global powers to confront uncomfortable realities. When he speaks of sovereignty, he makes foreign governments fear that their grip on African resources is slipping. And when he addresses his people, he injects them with a sense of pride long denied. This emotional spark is more dangerous than any weapon. It builds unity, and unity in Africa has always been the nightmare of colonizers and exploiters. But danger is not one-sided. Traore faces immense risks from within. Challenging entrenched elites, reshaping power structures, and resisting international pressure creates enemies at every level. Some see him as reckless, claiming his policies could bring Burkina Faso to economic collapse. Others whisper about foreign plots, waiting for the right moment to strike. Yet Traore seems unfazed, treating danger itself as proof of his mission's importance. His willingness to embrace risk, even at personal cost, elevates him into the realm of historical figures who defied empires. In truth, calling Traore dangerous depends on perspective. To those who wish Africa to remain quiet, he is a threat. To those who seek liberation, he is a shield. To history, he may well be remembered as the man who turned danger into destiny. The perception of Ibrahim Traore as dangerous intensifies when you examine how quickly his influence spreads beyond Burkina Faso. Leaders come and go, but very few capture the imagination of ordinary people across a continent. Traore has become a symbol, a young soldier turned president who refuses to bow to any foreign power. For young Africans, tired of being told their future must be decided in Washington, Paris, or London, he is proof that defiance is possible. His danger lies not only in his words but in the example he sets, that Africa can chart its own course without permission. International observers often describe him as too radical, but that is precisely why he resonates. He doesn't mask his frustrations behind diplomatic jargon. He names exploitation for what it is. He calls colonizers by their name. He declares openly that Africa's resources must benefit its people first. This lack of hesitation makes him unpredictable, and unpredictability is terrifying to those invested in maintaining control. His approach to sovereignty also pushes the boundaries of global geopolitics. Traore challenges Western dominance while simultaneously seeking new alliances, shifting Africa's place in the world order. To Washington, this feels like betrayal. To Paris, it feels like rebellion. But to Africans, it feels like long-awaited justice. His danger is amplified by his refusal to accept half measures. He doesn't simply want reforms, he wants transformation. And transformation threatens systems designed to remain unchanged. Yet, there is another layer of danger, the sheer weight of expectations placed upon him. Millions believe Traore will deliver what decades of leaders could not. If he succeeds, he proves that liberation is real. If he fails, disappointment could fracture the unity he has built. His enemies are betting on failure, his people are praying for victory. In this delicate balance, every move he makes carries historic weight. This is why calling Ibrahim Traore dangerous is more than a label, it's a recognition that his existence forces the world to face questions it would rather avoid. What if Africa no longer accepts the chains placed upon it? What if the young generation refuses to inherit submission? Traore embodies these questions, and in doing so, he becomes the spark that could ignite a fire far larger than himself. The danger surrounding Ibrahim Traore does not come only from his defiance of the West, but also from how he reframes Africa's identity in the global conversation. For decades, Africa was portrayed as a continent of need, needing aid, needing guidance, needing leadership from outside. Traore flips this narrative on its head. He does not plead for help, he demands respect. He does not speak as a subordinate, he speaks as an equal, sometimes as a superior. This shift rattles those who have long benefited from Africa's perceived weakness. When Traore speaks at rallies, his voice is not merely his own, it carries the echoes of a generation silenced by exploitation. His words draw energy from centuries of resistance, from every leader who tried to rise before and was crushed under external pressure. This historical memory is part of his danger. It makes him untouchable in the eyes of his people, who see in him the continuation of a struggle larger than one man. To remove Traore would be to fight against the very spirit of independence that now runs through the streets of Ouagadougou and beyond. Globally, analysts say his tone is reckless, but for many Africans, it is refreshing. They are weary of leaders who smile in foreign capitals while their people starve at home. Traore does the opposite. he raises his fist in defense of Africa while the world watches. His defiance exposes the imbalance of power. It forces uncomfortable truths into the spotlight, that much of Africa's poverty is manufactured, that much of its instability is imported, and that much of its suffering benefits someone else. What makes him particularly dangerous to global powers is that he refuses to isolate himself. He understands alliances. While rejecting Western dictates, he courts partnerships with countries willing to treat Africa with dignity. This dual strategy, rejection and realignment, signals a continent ready to play a new game. For those who relied on Africa's silence, Traore's voice is a thunderclap announcing that silence is over. In every word and every decision, Traore reminds the world that Africa is not waiting for permission anymore. His danger is not in violence or instability, but in awakening, a force far more difficult to control than armies or sanctions. What makes Ibrahim Traore especially dangerous to the status quo is not just what he says, but how people react to him. Across Africa, young people see him as proof that courage can still reshape history. In villages and cities, his speeches circulate on phones, turning into rallying cries far beyond Burkina Faso's borders. This contagious sense of empowerment is terrifying for those invested in keeping Africa divided and submissive. A leader who unites through defiance poses a greater threat than one who rules with armies. The West once depended on African leaders who quietly complied, who signed deals in backrooms and let resources flow out without protest. Traore refuses that role. He confronts foreign dignitaries publicly, often with blunt words that leave no space for negotiation as usual. When he says Africa owes nothing, he strips away the illusion that colonial debts still hold moral weight. He paints those debts as chains, and chains are made to be broken. His defiance turns every economic conversation into a moral battlefield. To global powers, this is destabilizing. They describe him as reckless, extreme, or unpredictable. But unpredictability itself is a weapon. For decades, Africa was predictable to exploit, predictable to manipulate. Traore's refusal to play that script introduces uncertainty, and uncertainty weakens control. Investors hesitate. Policymakers scramble. Allies reconsider their loyalty. One man's defiance ripples outward until it reshapes entire networks of power. Another layer of danger is his image as incorruptible. Many African leaders have risen with bold words only to be bought with wealth or silenced with privilege. Traore positions himself differently. He dresses like a soldier, not a businessman. He walks among ordinary people, not behind walls. Whether this image is fully real or partly crafted, it works. His people believe in him. Belief is power. Belief makes him harder to remove without igniting unrest. The danger Traore represents is not the instability of chaos but the stability of awakening. He is not a temporary storm, he is the signal of a shifting season. Those who underestimated him as just another fiery leader are beginning to realize he is not playing for headlines, he is playing for history. The danger of Ibrahim Traore is also in the simplicity of his message. He does not hide behind diplomatic jargon or endless negotiations. His words cut straight to the heart. Africa must stand on its own, Africa owes nothing, Africa will not bow. This clarity resonates with ordinary people who are tired of speeches that promise progress but deliver submission. When a leader speaks in the language of the streets, not the language of boardrooms, he awakens millions who suddenly feel they are part of the fight. His critics in the West argue that he is too young, too radical, too inexperienced. Yet these criticisms are double-edged. His youth makes him relatable to Africa's majority. Millions of people under 30 who see themselves reflected in his defiance. His so-called radicalism is simply honesty spoken in a world accustomed to polite lies. And his inexperience in global politics is precisely what shields him from the habits of compromise that have crippled older leaders. Every insult meant to weaken him only adds to his myth. Danger also lies in the fact that he is not alone. Traore represents a generation of leaders rising across Africa, voices in Mali, Niger, and beyond, that echo his stance against foreign domination. He may stand at the microphone, but behind him is a continent's frustration and hunger for dignity. Together, these movements form a chorus that cannot be silenced by removing one man. This interconnectedness multiplies the threat: remove him, and the message still survives. Global powers worry because his words are seeds, and seeds grow silently until fields transform. Each young person inspired to reject dependency, each community that demands control over its resources, is a victory for Traore's vision even without his direct presence. His power lies not in a single speech but in the wave it creates across time and space. In history, dangerous men are often remembered not for their weapons, but for their ability to redefine what people believe is possible. Traore is doing exactly that. He is redefining Africa not as a continent asking for aid, but as a continent demanding respect. And once people believe they deserve respect, no amount of pressure can return them to silence. What makes Ibrahim Traore dangerous to his opponents is not just his rhetoric, but the unpredictability of his strategy. Unlike leaders who follow predictable scripts dictated by global institutions, Traore is rewriting the script in real time. One day he is announcing military reforms, the next he is negotiating alliances with unexpected partners, and the next he is standing in front of massive crowds declaring Africa's absolute independence. This constant shift keeps both allies and rivals uncertain about his next move, and uncertainty is a powerful weapon. Western governments are used to leaders who play by established rules. Traore, however, has torn up that rulebook. He openly questions the fairness of international financial systems, calls out former colonial powers by name, and rejects military bases that many of his predecessors quietly accepted. By doing so, he exposes the hypocrisy of global powers who claim to support democracy while suppressing true self-determination. His danger lies in turning the mirror back on the world and forcing it to see its contradictions. But his most dangerous quality is that his words are not limited to speeches, they manifest in actions. Under his leadership, contracts with foreign corporations have been revisited, control over natural resources has been demanded, and regional solidarity has been strengthened. These actions disrupt economic interests worth billions, making him not only a political challenge but also a direct threat to entrenched financial networks. Every time he takes a step to reclaim control over Africa's resources, he touches nerves that stretch from Paris to Washington to Beijing. Traore's rise is also powered by something leaders cannot buy or manufacture: authenticity. He lives simply, speaks directly, and identifies himself with the struggles of ordinary people. In a world where many leaders are seen as distant or corrupt, this authenticity becomes a dangerous force because it builds unshakable loyalty. Supporters do not just vote for him, they are ready to defend his vision as their own. History shows that systems built on exploitation crumble not when armies invade, but when the oppressed believe they can resist. Traore embodies that belief. And as long as he carries it forward, he will be seen as one of the most dangerous men alive, not because he threatens violence, but because he threatens to awaken a continent. Ibrahim Traore's danger is amplified by his ability to speak a language that resonates not just with Burkina Faso, but with the entire global South. When he stands on a podium, he does not speak as a president tied to one country's borders, he speaks as if he represents all those who have been marginalized, exploited, or silenced. His words echo far beyond the walls of any hall or the borders of his nation. This universal voice makes him a figure that global powers cannot easily contain. They can silence one leader, but silencing an idea that crosses continents is far more difficult. What terrifies his opponents most is that Traore is not dependent on them. Many African leaders have relied heavily on Western aid, military support, or diplomatic approval to stay in power. Traore, in contrast, has cultivated strength by aligning with his people, and he openly states that survival does not come from handouts, but from self-reliance. This message inspires ordinary citizens and terrifies the systems built on dependency. A leader who refuses to bow cannot be manipulated with the usual tools of pressure. Moreover, his defiance carries a cultural dimension. Traore insists that Africa's identity, heritage, and traditions are not burdens of the past, but weapons of resistance for the future. By reclaiming pride in what others dismissed as backward, he transforms culture into a shield and a spear. This cultural awakening threatens the carefully maintained image of Africa as a place in need of saving, an image that powers have exploited for decades. The more he speaks, the more youth across Africa rally behind his vision. This generational wave is perhaps his greatest weapon. Young Africans no longer want leaders who trade independence for foreign approval. They want figures who are bold enough to confront the world on equal terms. Traore embodies that boldness, and in doing so, he becomes a symbol that outlives his presidency. Dangerous men throughout history have not always been those with the biggest armies, but those who ignite movements that cannot be extinguished. By this measure, Ibrahim Traore is already one of the most dangerous leaders of his era, because he does not just fight for power, he fights to rewrite the destiny of a continent. What ultimately makes Ibrahim Traore so dangerous is not just his courage, his defiance, or his ability to rally millions with words, it is the possibility that others will follow his example. History shows that once one leader breaks chains, others soon realize the chains were never unbreakable. This ripple effect is what global powers fear most. Traore's defiance is not confined to Burkina Faso. It sends shockwaves across Africa and beyond, planting seeds of rebellion in the minds of those still living under the weight of foreign influence. His message is both simple and radical: Africa owes nothing but to itself. For centuries, leaders have been pressured into believing that prosperity can only come through compliance with external demands. Traore flips this narrative, saying prosperity comes from rejecting dependency, reclaiming resources, and trusting the power of the people. In a world where economies are tightly intertwined, such independence is a direct threat to those who profit from Africa's submission. The danger lies not only in his words but also in his example. Traore walks among his soldiers, eats with ordinary citizens, and presents himself not as a distant ruler but as one of them. This closeness makes him hard to topple through traditional methods. You cannot scare a leader who is not isolated, and you cannot easily replace someone who embodies the hopes of his people. It is this bond with the masses that gives him a resilience far greater than weapons or wealth. Globally, his presence challenges long-standing balances. In a world dominated by a few powerful nations, Traore's insistence on African agency questions the very architecture of international politics. If Africa truly rises as he envisions, alliances will shift, and centuries-old hierarchies will crumble. For those invested in maintaining control, this is nothing short of terrifying. That is why Ibrahim Traore is described as dangerous. He is not simply a young leader in Burkina Faso, he is the embodiment of a storm that could reshape Africa's destiny and, by extension, the world. He is a reminder that sometimes the greatest danger to empires is not an army at the gates, but a voice that cannot be silenced.